Hello, my name is Collin Dumas, and I attended Trinity Christian Academy from my sophomore year of high school to my senior year graduation in spring of 2024. Trinity Christian Academy is a school where I made tons of friends, and I've met faculty who just really wanted to see me succeed and thrive in life. And I wouldn't trade my time at Trinity Christian Academy for anything, as it made me grow as a person and learn so many things about myself and other people. If you ask someone in the DFW area about Trinity Christian Academy who knows about the school, they'll tell you it's pretty infamous for its clickiness. They'll tell you that you need to find your group quickly, or you might kind of be swept under just the social happenings and you might become an outsider. While I think those rumors are overblown, I do think there's some truth in it. TCA is known as a school where you really need to find your niche. There are not as many people at the school as there are at the public schools. See, I transferred from a graduating class of 1,600 to a graduating class of just 125. While not the smallest in Texas by any means, it really makes you have to be intentional with your friendships and intentional about how you interact with people. You don't really just see a person once in the hallway and never again as you would at a larger public school. You are living with these people basically and going to school and spending 40 hours a week with these people, and more if you're doing extracurriculars and hanging out with people outside of school. So they almost become your family. I was lucky enough to find my people pretty quickly, even as someone who considers himself a social floater and kind of just likes to scope the situation out. But I know it's very hard for a lot of people, and I think that has to do with a lot with TCA's kind of colored history, and that's kind of what I wanted to talk about and kind of explore today. I wanted to talk to some of my friends who also graduated with me from TCA and kind of just get their opinion on the school in general, and maybe how the school's history or the school's clickiness or the school's religious education might play into kind of the isolation some people feel and kind of the mixed feelings about Trinity Christian Academy a lot of people have. So that's what I'm going to explore in this video today, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, I actually wanted to give my take and my opinion on my time at TCA before we get into the interviews and learn from some of my friends about their experiences. Like I said, I joined my sophomore year and I stayed until graduation. And this was 2021 is when I started that fall. And so this was the year right after the big COVID school year. COVID interfered with the in-person classes, and so it was very important to me going into my sophomore year that I could get into a school that was in a desk 5 days a week. And so that was a big reason for my switch from public school to private school, and especially TCA, because they were smaller, so it was less likely for big outbreaks to happen at the time. And so that kind of led to my decision to change schools. And if you ask anyone kind of in the area who's kind of high school age about TCA, they'll say that it is a school full of big personalities and a lot of cliques. And to some extent, they would be right. The school is a lot of extroverted people, a lot of people who make a lot of friends very quickly and who are kind of good at the social maneuverability and just making fast friends and being very extroverted. And that kind of manifests into these cliques that the school has. So, cliques such as, like the football team is very tight-knit. Members of clubs and organizations like the big school play, they are very tight-knit. The worship team, so our school actually had a student-led worship team. They are a very close, tightly knit community. And so you kind of make these friend groups and make these groups of people and kind of stick with them for a long time. At least that's what my observations were. And, but I think it's definitely overplayed. A lot of people say at TCA you aren't able to have a successful social life if you aren't kind of immediately finding yourselves in one of these groups. However, as someone who joined late and because of that kind of had to consider themselves kind of a social floater, kind of just floating between groups and kind of just being very adaptable to the people I was around. I think it's definitely possible to get through TCA as someone who doesn't immediately fall into a clique. When I got there, I really only knew one person. And because of that, I was kind of socially handicapped for a long time. I was kind of just the new person that people were kind of skeptical about, because each year after the freshman year, so for sophomore, junior, and senior year, you only expect around 3 to 5 new students. So I was one of the 3 new students in, the sophomore year, right? So I was kind of just this like oddity that people kind of just observed and kind of were just unsure about. So I was yet to make a name for myself. But I also knew I had to tread really lightly, because TCA is also known for their pretty conservative student body. Now, the accuracy of this can be debated. I do agree that it's not all conservative people, and I believe that maybe the breakdown of students is more 60-40. However, there's a large majority of these conservative students, and they will kind of socially outcast you if you kind of deviate from the norm that they kind of set in the school environment, right? So I knew that I had to tread very lightly and kind of be sort of a social chameleon and kind of just lay low and not be kind of loud about, how I want to express myself, because I knew that would kind of be ridiculed and not understood by the masses. And I think that this conservative community is so loud because they are kind of not challenged. You are kind of just, when you hear people in the hallways making racist remarks, saying very ignorant things and, these rude and derogatory terms towards groups of people, you're kind of just made to accept it, because it's kind of a community of compliance, I would almost say, that because the school is not very diverse, it's 85% white, and there are no kind of resources or outlets for members of sexual or gender minorities or LGBTQ students, right? There are no outlets for people like these, and there's not even a real good outlet for racial minority students, because they are such a small percentage of the school. You're kind of just meant to kind of just go with the undertow and kind of just go with the flow of people, and kind of just whatever other people are saying, you kind of just have to accept and kind of just go along with, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. So I think that's how the school kind of maintains its conservative environment. And I think that this is bred into the school, as it was founded as a segregation academy in the 1970s, right? Like, they do have a history of having very conservative administrative policies. They do bring in very conservative speakers that tout things like anti-evolution, like pro-war propaganda, things like anti-abortion. Their version of sex ed is abstinence until marriage, obviously, as a Christian school, right? And so it's things like this where, pregnant students are not accepted at the school and they're quietly told to leave. Students who are heard to have had an abortion are also told to quietly leave because they don't follow the school's code of conduct. The school's code of conduct is kind of how it enforces this conservative environment and keeps everyone in check, right? So even if you have these not as conservative beliefs, you are kind of forced to kind of go with the flow as the school kind of enforces these strict policies. And you'll kind of learn more about this as my friends talk about it, but there are just so many examples of just things that the school just does wrong, right? Like, I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence that our school every year, more like people will get kicked out for posting them saying racial slurs online or, sexually harassing people. I think that this school doesn't treat these situations as harshly as they should. They kick the students out, but they don't do anything to mend the issue. They kind of just are treating the symptoms but not the root cause, right? The root cause is this environment of students who feel very entitled and kind of just feel like they can kind of push people around, right? And so, like I said, you'll learn more about this when my friends talk about it, and I really hope you enjoy what they have to say. We are all in the same grade, we all graduate at the same time, and you know, I didn't necessarily run with all these people for my entirety of high school, but they're kind of just people I met along the way, and kind of we just agree. We're very like-minded in kind of just how we believe that TCA treats people isn't necessarily the best, and it manifests itself in different ways. And we all believe TCA shortcomings manifest itself in different ways, and they kind of show up in different places. And we might not necessarily agree on what exactly is the cause and what exactly is the fix, but we all agree that this school is controversial, is sort of not the best when it comes to treating situations like treating like controversial situations and treating situations with the students. And so I just want to highlight those. And in the background of the audio, you'll see pictures that both myself and my friends have shared, kind of just highlighting our high school experience, because we just want to kind of emphasize the fact that although the school has so many problems, we are able to make light of these situations, and just make the most of our high school career, even though you go through the hallways and you hear students say these terrible things, or the school makes a terrible backwards decision on what you can wear, or how you can express yourself, even though the school is kind of cracking down on things that necessarily not necessarily are the best, and they're pushing policy that's not the best, and students aren't doing the best things and aren't acting right. Even though that all this is happening, we're able to make the most of our high school experience and still enjoy it, and not kind of revel in the fact that our school is not the best and kind of is backwards in a lot of places. We are still able to kind of create our own environment of acceptance and love. And I just really wanted to highlight that, because the people I've met in this journey of high school have literally made my experience so good, and I really wouldn't trade it for anything. And so yeah, I'm super excited to have my friends share their experience. So the first interview you'll hear from is Ben, and I hope you enjoy.
Guys, be quiet. I'm doing an interview.
I'm gonna keep that in. Just kidding. Okay, do you want me to start over? Might be easier.
No, it's fine. I'm built different.
Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Ben, and I was a student at TCA, and I went there with Collin, and I am now a art student at Savannah College of Art and Design.
How would you describe your time at TCA?
This was a very unloaded question, so I wrote a bit on it because I had a lot of thoughts about it. So my entire time there was literally just spent thinking about leaving. So I was transferred to TCA in ninth grade, freshman year. But before then, in fifth grade, I had started questioning if I was queer or not. And this continued until I finally settled on oh yeah, I guess I am gay in seventh grade. And this was an extremely isolating thing to come to terms with, as the majority of people in my life were religious and homophobic. So I begged not to be transferred to TCA, but I was. And this dropped the amount of not outwardly homophobic people I knew to literally zero. And people at school were way more aggressive about it than my church and family had been as well, which led to me feeling very scared and isolated all the time. Thankfully, I managed to find a small group of friends who weren't cartoonishly evil. But it was a pretty not awesome time. But in interest of being fair to TCA, the actual education I think was really great. while in school, I'd always felt like ahead of everyone and bored. TCA really challenged me and I learned a lot. History and English classes were combined, so we would analyze historically relevant books for things we were covering. Books which I am very glad to have read, like Epic of Gilgamesh, The Odyssey, Dante's Inferno, The Great Gatsby, and a lot of other stuff. Even if my opinions on whether the books were actually good differed a lot, like there was some garbage that we read that was like historical stuff, but I'm still glad I read it because like a lot of my friends I've talked to in college have never even like touched books like that. So I was glad that we went over it. I really enjoyed some parts of the science curriculum. Like we had an entire project dedicated to collecting and pinning bugs freshman year, which was really fun. And I also took a field ecology elective where we learned to identify animals in the wild. And the art program was especially really good with an entire building dedicated to it. We learned how to do a ton of stuff that I have a leg up on now, like in college, like drawing with ink, painting, animation, Photoshop, printmaking, ceramics, and like general critique on work. This was the supposed reason my parents sent me there, but I don't know if I believe them. But yeah, we got to wear jeans every Friday. We left school 2 hours early. The main issue was just like the religious ideology being pushed so violently 24/7 and the people who were doing it.
What is one event you remember that epitomizes the TCA experience?
Okay, so one time for homecoming week, I mean, this happened every year to some extent, but this year it was particularly bad. For the entirety of homecoming week, we got to wear outfits based on like a theme, but there were certain rules about the outfits, and they would bring people up on stage to show examples of what you couldn't do. They'd bring someone up on stage who was a good example, and they'd bring someone up who was a bad example. And one of the rules that they exemplified was, I quote, no cross dressing. So basically, boys couldn't wear skirts and girls couldn't wear suits or whatever, you know what I mean? So they brought up a guy in a skirt to show the bad example, and everyone immediately started booing him. And someone screamed, "Get off the stage, you T slur." So that was, I think, very TCA core.
Are you aware of TCA's controversial past, like it being formed as a segregation academy, as well as the time they kicked out a gay student in 2004? And do you think that still impacts students today?
Yes, definitely. I actually did a lot of research into the way that the school was founded, and basically what they did is that the school was founded specifically whenever desegregation was starting to become standardized across everywhere. So it just conveniently a private school happened to open up that touted its Christian values, and the headmaster was quoted as saying a bunch of racist shit. And oh, we're just living in uncertain times, and we just want a safe haven from all the chaos of the world. And then they would just not accept black people into the school. And then whenever people were like, "Why are there no black people?" They're like, "Well, they just didn't have good enough grades." And like, it's weird because all of this stuff is publicly available online, specifically the Wikipedia article for the school. But I looked into the Wikipedia article, and the school is actively has been fighting a battle with the admins of the article for years, trying to get this section taken down. But yeah, no, there's like literally they hang up school yearbook photos in the hallway of like all the graduating classes, and if you look down the line, you can see that the old graduating classes were entirely white for years and years and years until like the 90s, whenever they get like maybe like one Asian kid, one black kid. And like over the years, it's definitely gotten better, but there's definitely still that aspect of discrimination to an extent because it's very suspicious that the population of the area is 50% races other than white, and then the school is 85% white. So like it cannot be all good grades and everything. That is very sus.
How do you think this impacts the school's social dynamics?
I think that racism is very much a problem at this school. Not only was it a segregation school in the 70s, which the 70s is extremely recent. And there is a big culture of like racism being a funny thing to joke about, especially in like certain cliques of friend groups and all that. I know people who will have entire Discord servers who would have entire channels dedicated to saying racial slurs. And there have been so many comments from teachers that are just so insensitive. Examples of comments I've heard from teachers. One time, my Bible teacher said, "You know how whenever you see a Muslim person in the airport, you get scared?" And he just like said that like offhandedly, and I immediately raised my hand, and I was like, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" And he was like, "You just don't know." And I was like, the whole class was silent, and I was the only person saying this, and I felt like I was losing my mind because no one was saying anything. And I was like, "That's so racist. Why would you say that?" And he's like, "No, it's not. It's just statistics." And I just had to sit there and be like, "Okay, man. Like, what am I supposed to do? That's the teacher. How am I supposed to fight this?" And I just had to let him move on, and that sucked, man. And like, we read a Huckleberry Finn, and my teacher would censor the word "god damn it," but she would read out the N word, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, and then someone be like, "Hey man, you can't say that," and then she'd be like, "Well, it's in the text," but then she wouldn't say "god damn it," and it's like, why? This is it's so rude. It's so rude and so awful that that stuff is allowed to happen. It just makes me so upset whenever I think about it.
How is dissenting opinion treated at TCA? What's an example of a time you disagreed with the majority?
So it was my first week of being at this new school with all these new people, and it was science class, freshman year. And I hadn't really gotten the vibe yet. And the teacher asked a question that was like super open ended. Like she got all of us in a circle to have a discussion. And she asked, "So, what are your guys' thoughts on evolution?" And I was like, okay, I'm gonna make a good impression on this teacher and try to participate in the class discussion because I'm new here and I want to try to be a good student. So I raised my hand and I'm like, I think that the whole Darwin evolution theory is really interesting, and I think it's cool that there's like evidence of it happening even now with like microevolution and stuff. And immediately this teacher, she gets so mad. She proceeds to spend the next 20 minutes talking about how stupid people who believe in evolution are in front of the entire class, and she doesn't even accept any more questions. I'm just sitting there like it's my first day at new school, and this teacher is just like dunking on me in front of the entire class, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry."
Why did you stay at TCA until graduation?
Um, I stayed at TC until graduation because so my parents like they transferred me to TCA, and I was like, I can't, like I literally do not want to be here. This sucks. And like obviously the evolution thing happened, and I immediately go home and I'm like, "Please, please, I'll do anything to leave this school immediately. I'm just like, get me out of here." And they're like, "Oh, you just don't know if you like it yet. You just don't know. It's always hard transitioning to a new place." And I'm like, "I will do literally anything. Please get me out of here." And they're just like, "You know what? We're going to give you 1 year in this school. And if you still don't like it by the end of year one, you can change schools." So I'm just like, "God, this sucks. I have to spend a whole year here, but fine. Okay. It's better than nothing. At least have something." So I spent the entire freshman year just being like, just 1 year, just 1 year, just 1 year. Just I just have to get through this, just 1 year. And then I get to the end of the first year, and immediately graduation, or like it wasn't graduation, but like end of freshman year, I go up to my parents immediately and I'm like, "All right, you said I could transfer. Get me out of here. I want to leave." And they're like, um, "No, actually." And I'm like, "What do you mean no?" And they're like, they didn't even like give me a reason. They were just like, "Well, you've made all these friends now and you're gonna have to leave them." And I'm like, "I literally know like one person here. This sucks. I want to leave." And they just didn't let me leave. And then like the years after that, I was just like, "Well, there's no point." And like I just was going through so much stuff at the time. I just did not have the mental capacity to argue with them further, and I kind of knew that it would be an argument in vain. So yeah, that's the reason I stayed.
What is one strong opinion you have about TCA?
They claim to follow Christianity, but they're too delusional to see how far they've strayed from what the Bible's actually trying to convey. And they've created like this bastion of ignorance that's shielded from the outside world through a series of like legal loopholes about like acceptance rates and like private schools being allowed to practice their own doctrine different from public schools, and it allows segregation, it allows bigotry, it allows prejudice, it allows all of it to fester in one spot. And I just like that is just unforgivable and intentional malice in my eyes. And like if the God they believe in thinks that's okay, then I do not think that is a fair God, and that is not one that I have any interest in following.
I just started recording, but I'm going to cut the front part
Okay.
off, obviously.
Yeah. Just let me know when we're going official with it, or if we need to like re-record because of how it is bad or something.
So, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Howdy, I am Luca. I graduated from TCA, and now I'm at the University of Arkansas.
How would you describe your time at TCA?
I would say that it was probably a solid 8 out of 10. It was kind of like freaky church camp if you think about it, and I don't know. The academics were pretty tough, but other than that, it was all right. It was all right.
What is one event you remember that epitomizes the TCA experience?
One event I remember that epitomizes the TCA experience is there was this spiritual emphasis week at TCA that they would do once a year. I think other private schools do it too. And this one lady, she went up on stage and she gave this like powerful message about how she was on this missionary trip. And then this guy came to assassinate her, but then he started like speaking a different language, and then she started speaking a different language, and then he became a Christian, and it was awesome. But in the midst of that story, she kept like advertising her book. She would like tell the story, and then she'd be like, "Buy my book," and then she would tell the story. You can find more about this in my book. And I don't know. I feel like that kind of epitomizes the TCA experience.
How did the school's focus on a Christ-centered education impact you?
It kind of ended up hurting both ends of the spectrum because if you like put like Christianity into academics too much, it's gonna like subtract from the academics. And then if you try to like intertwine like academics into like the religion of Christianity, I feel like that also detracts from Christianity. So you get this I don't know, like the worst of both worlds kind of put into both things. I mean, there were some like good parts of it, but I think that just like generally kind of meh. I think that if anything, it just made me more confused about like my faith and stuff because I was raised Christian, going to church and stuff. So like what they were teaching at the school was nothing really new to me. It just kind of felt a little bit inauthentic and I don't want to say watered down, but just very specific and very inauthentic, kind of just more like doctrine and less of like personal connection. But for me, it was just like, okay, here's academics, here's school, and then also Jesus is here, I guess.
What are your thoughts on the school's code of conduct? Are there any rules that seemed egregious or just stuck out to you?
Um, I don't think there were any rules that were egregious. That I can remember. I don't remember ever having any huge personal issues with the rules. My bigger issue though was the fact that they just would not enforce some other rules. Like they'd go up on stage and they'd be like, "Racism is bad, sexism is bad. We're not going to do any of that." But then like kids in the halls would just be talking about that stuff all the time, and after school kids would be doing like horrible things and saying horrible stuff, and they really just cared about what happened inside the school or anytime something big enough outside the school happened to where like it would actually like cause a problem. So I don't know. They didn't really do a good job of cultivating like a healthy environment. They just were huge sticklers on like dress code and stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, like an example of something that caught a lot of flack that they were forced to kind of crack down on was?
They would be like, oh, there's this party, and then this kid got like sexually assaulted at the party, right? And they would just be like, this, like this kid got expelled, this person got suspended. If any of you do any of this ever again, and it's going to be really, really bad. And they would talk about it at chapel for like the next like week or two. But honestly, like nothing, now that you say that, nothing like serious like change happened because of what they were saying from that.
So why did you stay at TCA until graduation?
Um, well, when I first went to TCA, it was like I really didn't want to go because I used to go to this other school back over in Rockwall, and that school was awesome. And like the general TCA environment was definitely a big culture shift. Um, I'd say like generally it's pretty clicky and stuff, which is whatever. I mean, all schools are clicky, but I think once I got like good grounding in like with the teachers and like my friends especially, I kind of just didn't want to leave. It was like I guess I'm stuck for the long haul, and I want to see this through. And I don't regret seeing it through. I think it was a lot of fun, even though it did have some downsides. You know,
What is one strong opinion you have about TCA?
they had this learning lab program back when I went, and it was for kids with like mental disabilities, like ADHD and autism or whatever, and it would basically help them like stay. They'd have their own study hall, they'd have extended test time, whatever, and you could like kind of get tutoring if you wanted to. Um, and they would charge like a ton of money for it. That's my big issue is that they made you pay like a huge yearly fee. I think it was either $2,000 or $4,000 to get into Learning Lab or something like that, alongside proving that like you need it. So I don't know. That was something that kind of icked me the wrong way. It's like if you were financially struggling and going to TCA, I guess, but financially struggling and going to TCA, you wouldn't be able to put your kid through Learning Lab and give them the help they needed. So that was my personal beef.
Wait, hold on. Okay, so for the introduction, do I just say my name or is there anything else to it?
Luca said, "Hi, my name's Luca. I went to TCA with Collin."
Oh, okay.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm David, and I went to TCA same year as Colin, and currently I'm going to Texas A&M University.
How would you describe your time at TCA?
I would say it's a little difficult to describe my time at TCA since I went there basically my entire life for 13 whole years. So it's difficult to compare it with what a normal school would have been like, but I did make good friends. There were some teachers that I liked okay, and I'm much better at writing for it, so I appreciate that.
What is one event you remember that epitomizes the TCA experience?
So, as you may or may not know, there's been a bit of a conflict going on in the Middle East for a while, and this was 2 years ago, so it was about when it was all starting. I was talking to a teacher, and he was kind of known as the open-minded, free-thinking teacher. And I was talking about, how unfair I thought a lot of the bias in media was about how they were talking about it. And he was kind of compassionate. He was like, "Yeah, yeah, I kind of hear what you're talking about, that's really tragic, I'm sorry to hear that." And then we had the speaker, and the speaker goes on and he gives the most one-sided, evangelical kind of view of the whole situation that I've ever heard. More extreme than really anyone I'd talked to. And then I went back and I talked to that teacher and I said, "Man, that was really upsetting." And he was like, "Well, not like there's really anything we can do about it, but I appreciate your opinion." And so that was interesting. That was strange. I realized that there's just not a ton of room for dissent at TCA.
What is something you think TCA handled right, and what is something you think TCA didn't handle correctly?
So I realized this only after leaving TCA and kind of hearing from, other people's experiences at school. I realized that at least in terms of like physical fighting and bullying, TCA did not have it nearly as bad as some other schools. Like there was maybe one fight the whole time I was there, like at school, and it was just like a slap fight. It was nothing. And I can say personally, as someone who was honestly kind of bullied for some of my time at TCA, it was not near as bad as a lot of people had it. Like I had my friends, other people had theirs, and we kind of just didn't interact, but it wasn't like super antagonistic. It was just kind of it was it was kind of nice even. But something that they definitely don't do well is like letting you hear like different opinions on things. It's interesting because in every single class they teach you that evolution is a myth and it's fake and it doesn't happen unless you take AP biology. And then they teach you obviously that evolution did happen because you have to pass the exam on it.
TCA frequently brought in speakers to talk to the entire high school. What were those speakers like?
So we got, I would say, a wide variety of speakers, but I wouldn't say that's actually accurate. We got a lot of, man, you know, I wanted to play football, and then I had an injury, and then I prayed to God, and God helped me play football better. And I'm just really appreciative for that, and that's why you should believe in God. And it felt like that was a lot of the speaker's experience, but occasionally we would get someone who would come in and be like, the flood disproves evolution, or there was this one lady who basically just told us to buy her book the entire time. So the speakers, they were interesting.
What are your thoughts on the school's code of conduct? Are there any rules that seemed egregious or stuck out to you?
Yeah, so for the most part, the code of conduct seemed to make sense, except when it came to like how long the girls' skirts were supposed to be, because it was always a battle. It was like constantly like the teachers would be blaming the girls, like you can't wear a skirt that short, you'll tempt the guys. And I thought that was strange. But it was a constant thing. It felt like every other week they would be like, okay, girls, stay behind. And then I'd ask a friend about it, and she'd be like, yeah, they said our skirts were too short again.
Why did you stay at TCA until graduation?
I'll be honest, I mostly stayed because it was the only place I'd ever gone and because that's where all my friends were. And once I even really started having the thought about like going to a different school, I was already, pretty much in high school and I wasn't gonna make a bunch of new friends in high school.
And what is one strong opinion you have about TCA?
I feel pretty strongly about the way it was kind of treated as acceptable to like hate things you didn't understand, like other people, like because the school was so, I mean, I'll just say it, it was like super white. Like it was kind of acceptable to make jokes like at the expense of like other races of people or like gay people especially. Like that was just fine and like the obviously the teachers wouldn't do anything about it. Like no one really stepped in to stop that from happening. And it got so bad that I think the only time I've ever like heard of anyone like getting in trouble for that was when like three kids finally got expelled for it. Like after just they're doing a promposal thing and then like they spelled out, I don't know how they did it, but they like had the letters for the N word and then they spelled those out and then like took a picture and then posted that on Instagram. So
Okay, okay.
that's pretty bad, I think.
It's pretty bad.
That's my hot take.
It's your hot take. Racism is bad. No, I'm kidding.
And
um,
you know, at TCA, they would disagree with me on that. So brave.
what did you think about the presentations we had to give in our senior year of Bible about controversial topics?
Our projects, I know we had to do this twice. I only remember the second semester, which was about isms. And so it was different. It was largely different, like philosophies and ideologies. I can't remember a single one of the ones that's like fit the prompt. I only remember the two outliers, which were transgenderism and Israel-Palestine conflict, which is kind of crazy. But I did my presentation on transgenderism, and it was supposed to kind of be related to what the Bible says about it. But it's strange for that to be one of them because the Bible doesn't really mention that at all. And so my presentation was more just kind of going over like, what medical experts say about the topic. And it had like barely a passing mention of the Bible. But it was pretty stressful giving that presentation to a class of people that I knew were gonna disagree with me. And I will say disagree with the medical experts. Okay, it was a well-researched presentation. I had a lot of sources, but I don't think I changed any minds, obviously. But I'm kind of more so it was I'm just proud of myself for being able to give that presentation. I don't think anyone like really was like, I never really thought about this. I think my mind has changed. But some people did talk to me after, and they were semi-supportive. So I kind of appreciate
Okay.
Should I just start?
I'll
Let me
ask it
think,
and then you can
actually.
start. Yeah, yeah. Just tell me when
Okay,
you want
okay.
to. Just tell me when you're ready to answer it. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Sarah.
And how would you describe your time at TCA?
I first began attending TCA during my sophomore year. I would say that I had a regular high school experience, honestly leaning towards positive.
And what is one event you remember that epitomizes the TCA experience?
I think my first day of school stood out to me. During lunch, there were lots of classmates who were coming up to me and like wanting me to sit with them, but I didn't know anybody, so I sat with the student who was like assigned to show me around. And like the social situations worked fast. Like I felt after that day, I was kind of locked into that friend group for the rest of the year. And I felt like that's just really TCA. Like you're kind of locked into your clique.
Are you aware of TCA's controversial past? For example, being formed as a segregation academy, as well as how they kicked out a gay student in 2004. Do you think it still impacts students today?
Yeah, someone had told me about it pretty early on. I was surprised by it, but not really. With the way that it was described to me, it also sounded like the student had some behavioral problems for the reason why they got kicked out, but I also understand that's the telephone game, so I don't actually know the original story, but I did hear it. I think it affects some students a lot, especially if they're someone who's also debating their own sexuality. It's kind of like this big tale that you can't really be yourself because of this guy who got kicked out.
Being a Christian school in the South, how did the school address topics such as LGBTQ, abortion, evolution, gender, etc.?
I honestly want to say that it didn't. The school itself rarely brought up those controversial topics. I felt like more often than not, it was far right students who were bold enough to like be bringing it up during school. But they were obviously looking for debates. Like they weren't trying to, be inclusive or address them properly. So I felt like everybody was walking on eggshells for both the student body and for the school itself. Um, but like if the school is pressed on the topic, they'd probably put out like a conservative opinion, just like an overall statement, but they would still stay pretty neutral about it. But then if you went and asked like individual teachers, they would give you a wide range of answers based on their personal opinion. And it felt like the school just was hesitant to go either which way, but it definitely did lean conservative.
Why did you stay at TCA until graduation?
So I had actually come from another school in Dallas, and I realized that like despite all the bad parts at TCA, I actually did want to stay because at my old school, yes, like yes, this community at TCA can be hit or miss, especially if you're late to the party like I was and like it's hard to like break into it, but they at least had a community where I felt like at my old school in Dallas, like there wasn't any sense of that. It was also COVID, so that had a part in it. But then for the major reason was because of the academics at TCA. I felt like they were actually very valuable and worth my time, so I felt like I got a really good education.
What is one strong opinion you have about TCA?
I feel like the relationship between students, teachers, and then the higher ups are very strained, and like it feels like you can have lots of personal issues in between the lines where teachers can't like accurately, properly report bad things that the students are doing, because of the relationship that like the parents aren't gonna comply with punishment for the student. So I don't know. It's a bad thing where it's like he said she said, and that's a strong opinion I've had since the beginning where it's hard for the administration to take teachers' sides. on situations where kids should really be punished.
Was there a particular teacher at TCA that had a marked positive impact on you?
Yes, my chemistry teacher, actually my sophomore year of high school, had a really, really good impact on me that, and she felt different than all the other teachers. Um, and it wasn't like smooth sailing at first. There was kind of this reputation she had for being like very difficult to deal with. And I felt that vibe too. Like the first day of school, I came like the Monday after Labor Day, and I had just joined the class, and she made me take the unit test for something I hadn't even studied. Um, but so I had the same opinion as everyone else, like, oh wow, she's kind of scary. But I want to say throughout the year, I realized that her hard style of teaching was actually something very unique that I hadn't been seeing in other teachers, in the sense that, like, she wasn't coddling the students. And there was this one moment where we were working on this topic, and we were all doing an assignment, and we were going over the answers in class. And I had she just made me go through all of them, but it was kind of on the spot. I thought I had all the answers and I was just going to read them all out. And as I did, she wasn't telling me whether I got them correct or wrong. I just kept going and going. And the whole class was like silent and it was like very nerve-wracking. But by the end, she had this very calm demeanor, like, you got them all correct. And I don't know why. That just like, I, after that, and then the weeks following, I just got like gained this extreme respect for her. And I realized that she really did want all of us to learn. And I felt like that was something that I didn't really see in teachers who maybe were kinder, but they weren't as invested in our actual learning. And so, yeah, that was just a really wonderful teacher that I had, and I would love to have her again.